Alright guys, so in today's video we're going to be learning about fraction subtraction, which is actually very extremely super similar to fraction addition, which is the first video I made, right? So for fraction subtraction, it's the same idea that we had when we were adding fractions. So let's say we have 1 over 2 and we want to subtract, let's say 1 over 8, right? So just like when we were adding fractions, we didn't have the same denominator, so we couldn't actually add it. So in this case, we're subtracting fractions, so we can't subtract unless we have the same denominator. So basically what I mean is that this 2 and this 8, these two denominators, they have to be the same, right? So they have to be multiples of each other, right? Well, these are well, the result has to be a multiple of both of them. So right here, this 8, what we can do is we can get this 8 and multiply it to the numerator and to the denominator. We can get this 2 and multiply it to the numerator and to the denominator of this fraction. And the reason when we can do this is because, well, what's 2 over 2? Well, that's 1, right? So we're not actually changing the value of this, right? You know, if you just multiplied it by 2, then you would be changing the value. But if you multiply by 2 over 2, which is 1, well, anything times 1 is itself, so you don't change its value. So let's do this. So 8 times 1, that'll give us 8. 8 times 2, that's 16, okay? Minus, what's 2 times 1? Well, that's 2. 8 times 2 is 16. So now if you look at our fraction now, they have the same denominator. So just like when we're adding, we can actually subtract now. So this would just be 8 minus 2, and then we keep the denominator. So 8 minus 2, well, that's 6 over 16, right? And we can simplify this. Why? Because they're both, the numerator and the denominator are both even. So like I said in the first video, when you have a fraction and both the numerator and the denominator are even, that's a good indication that you can simplify the fraction. So let's try dividing by 2, because that's what an even number means. If it's even, that means it's divisible by 2. So I'm going to divide by 2 over 2, which is again 1. So if I'm dividing by 1, it doesn't really change anything. Well, so what's 6 divided by 2? Well, this is 3. 16 divided by 2, that's 8, right? So now we have 3 over 8, right? This is odd, this is even, so that's a good indication that we can simplify, you know? There are cases when you can, but in this case we can't, right? So we have an odd over an even, so we can't simplify, right? So that would be our first example. So let's try a different one. So let's say we have, let's see, where do we have? Say we have 2/5 and we want to subtract, again, let's say 1/8, right? So for this, yet again, we don't have the same denominator, so we want to find the least common denominator between these two fractions. So here our denominator is 8, so we're going to multiply this by 8, and we're going to be multiplying this by 8. Here is 5, so we're going to multiply this by 5 and this by 5. Yet again, it's 1, and this is 1, so we're not changing anything, right? So 8 times 2, well, that's 16 over 8 times 5 is 40, right? So multiplication should be quintessential for this stuff. You guys have to know the multiplication for this ones. For these problems, you have to have mastered multiplication. 1 times 5, that's 5. 8 times 5, that's 40, right? Well, what's 16 minus 5? Right, well, that's 11 over 40, right? So we have an odd over an even, so we can very confidently say that this is our most reducible fraction of these two subtraction fractions. Excuse me.